I'm very excited to introduce Tim Thomas here today, and he's going to be talking about an introduction to homeopathy. Tim, I've learnt from Tim over many years. He's one of my mentors.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So yeah, as Christopher said, I've been doing homeopathy many years. I realized I was introduced to the principles and the major principle of homeopathy exactly 42 years ago next month. And I've kind of lived and breathed it ever since. I am originally from Old South Wales, and I did an honours degree at the Imperial College in London in physics. And then I got interested in alternative therapies and created an eclectic study for myself. And I was advised, I had, those, when you're in that space, you bump into different people. And an Irishman came into my life who'd worked in Canberra, studied with Kim Dudley. And he said, he kept, he told me about, he was talking about Bill Mollinson's biodynamics and what's it called? What does Bill do? Not the biodynamics.
Permaculture.
He's had us building a garden on the top of, we were an attic flat in the middle of London near Marble Arch, and we're building I'm carting dirt up on the top so we can do some sort of permaculture thing. Anyway, it was exciting. I was in my 20s. It was fun, and there was all this stuff going on. And he kept dropping things in, and I'd ask him questions, and he'd say, "Oh, the best person to talk to is Kim Dudley. You should go." And he used his Irish blarney and had me travel, all the way across the world, and was blessed to meet this man, and then basically apprentice myself to him, and I've been here ever since. And I studied homeopathy and herbal medicine, and to be able to fund myself initially, we realized that I had to study something medical. So I trained as a registered nurse in the local Canberra and Woden Valley hospitals, 10 years in the hospital system, whilst I started a business with Kim called the Hierophant in Griffith. I don't know if you guys know it, and I pride myself with the business in that we have one of the largest dispensaries of herbal and homeopathic medicines that you'll find anywhere, and we'll send it all over the world if they need it. Or if you know.
So here's what we're going to outline today. What do you know about homeopathy? A bit about Samuel Hahnemann and his life, William Cullen and Peruvian bark, like cues like, the concept of healing, a bit of a remedy focus, and then some books. So
firstly, before we start on that, listening to what Christopher's got with his Herbal Hub, or Herbology Hub, and what you're out to, your intentions are. Christopher does sell some herbs to us and grows some herbs that I ask him to grow, which is fantastic, that we're having difficulty finding in different places. And the other thing is that sort of like 80 to 90% or 80% of homeopathic medicines are plant medicines. So we need people growing these plants. The herbalists are more likely moving into, into phytopharmacy. They're more becoming the constituents of the plants rather than the energy of the plant itself. Anyway, I just lovely to know that, there's people out there who are intent on growing and providing and nurturing these amazing healing, I don't know whether they call them beings or something, that, the plant world. I suppose if you ended up in Findhorn, it would be a bit like that. Anyway, so what do you know about homeopathy? Most people have some idea, and most are something like, well, you give small doses of something and it's natural, and you give something that's sort of like could poison you, but and that's about it. So one of the first things to say to you guys is that throughout our lives and in our life, you are already homeopaths. You've just forgotten your homeopaths. So whatever understanding you have at the present time, just park it somewhere. Otherwise, you'd be trying to fit into what I say, but you will naturally do that anyway. But as best you can, just park it to one side. So just a little bit about Samuel Hahnemann. This was, basically a child prodigy who brought up in Meissen. He got to he got scholarships to go to Leipzig University. He spoke about 6, 7, 8 languages. I don't know. He, was even teaching his own teachers Hebrew in his teen years. He was one of those kids who liked to have his own little herbal garden and his bug collection, and loved his father to lock him in a room with a problem in logic. And it was. And they recognized his first year or so at Leipzig University as a medical student. They recognized his genius. The head surgeon would take him his ward rounds with him. That just would never happen in this day and age. So one of the books, when he actually stopped, he criticized the medicine of the day. He felt that they were just using recipes that Galen had used, that the ancients had used, and he said they don't really know what the different substances that they're using do. So he started working with an apothecarist and exploring what the different substances, hence his interest in chemistry. And to supplement himself, as I said, he was translating medical treatises, and there was a Dr. William Cullen, a Scottish physician, had written a Materia Medica, somewhat like your MIMS, or a list of all the remedies and the different conditions they would treat. And he came to the chapter on the Peruvian bark. Now, Peruvian bark was the remedy in that day and age for malaria. It had been discovered in South America by the Jesuit priests. They'd brought it back. There was great interest in it because there was a lot of malaria that happening, especially in Europe, but especially in Rome and around that region.
Mm.
And interestingly, it wasn't until the 1900s that Mussolini drained the marshes that were around Rome. So at the time, back in the 70s, they didn't know it was the mozzies. And so even the Pope and various cardinals would get malaria. So to have a treatment for malaria was profound in some ways and very powerful. And some of you empire building countries, England, and definitely the Dutch got hold of the plant and they grew it in Java so they could use it to treat their soldiers and sailors with. Now, in the book, William Cullen states that this remedy treats malaria because of its effect on the stomach and that it's a bitter herb. Now, Hahnemann thought about this and said, well, gentian's a bitter herb, but it doesn't treat malaria. Angostura is a bitter herb, but it doesn't treat malaria. So he then did what you might wish all of your physicians do, and that is he took measured dosages of the Peruvian bark and slowly poisoned himself with it, and was surprised to notice that he began to develop symptoms that mimicked malaria. He stopped taking it and the symptoms went away, took it again and the symptoms came back. He then had some colleagues do the same thing and they had the same experience. He then spent the next 6 years experimenting with other substances, other remedies that they knew treated X, and observed that when they poisoned themselves with it, they developed symptoms that mimicked X. And so he eventually coined that term similia similibus curentur, which is like cures like. I don't know if I've jumped. So basically, everything that seemed to they knew treated X, if they now were discovering, if they were in inverted commas healthy and they started to poison themselves with those substances, they started to develop X. And that taking the substance themselves to see what symptoms evoked, he was basically, in German, it was to test is apparently proven, and so they called it proving the remedy, to see what symptoms it could cause, and then hence what symptoms it can cure. And put simply, that similia similibus curentur is like cures like.